This week on The Watchman, we are back on the Israel-Syria border for an update on the world's bloodiest conflict. I am standing right now on Israel's Golan Heights, but just over my shoulder, a few short miles away in Syria, we have villages controlled by the likes of the Assad regime, Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda. Some of the world's worst actors have all gathered in one place. And today, we are joined by the perfect man to break it all down. Elliot Chodoff is a top military and strategic analyst. He's also a veteran of the Israel Defense Forces and still serves today as a major in the IDF reserves. He'll explain why what's happening right here over my shoulder matters not only to Israelis, Syrians, increasingly Iranians, Turks, and Russians, but to you, no matter where you live. Get the inside story of the Syria conflict today on The Watchman, only with Christians United for Israel, and only right here on TBN. Danger ahead. Elliot, thank you so much for joining us here on the Israel-Syria border. Finally, we get to do this together.
I know, it's great. It's a pleasure to be with you.
I know. We've been planning this for a while, Elliot. You're such an expert on current events in Syria, Lebanon, how it affects Israel and the West, by the way. But this spot where we're standing right now in the Golan Heights has a long history of some very pivotal battles, conflicts.
This is actually a memorial to the 77th Tank Battalion that fought here in the Yom Kippur War 45 years ago. This area was the site of one of the major thrusts of the Syrian army on Yom Kippur. There was essentially a 3 to 4 day battle that took place here.
Right here where we're standing.
Here, literally right here. This front in front of us is really where the battle took place. As a matter of fact, there's a tank down here, the second one below us, that used to be here where we're standing, and that's where it was stopped in the battle. To understand the importance of this area today, we should go back a little bit further before the Yom Kippur War to the Six-Day War, 1967. During that war, the Israeli army faced the Egyptians, the Jordanians, the Syrians, also the Iraqis, the Lebanese, but 3 major fronts. This border was established on the last day of the Six-Day War in order to be defensible against the attack that didn't come until Yom Kippur 1973.
6 years later.
Exactly. In other words, the border that was established was tested as a defensive border on Yom Kippur 1973. So we have a line of volcanoes. That way is north, that way is east. Syrians would come from that direction. And this line of volcanoes, and we can see a couple of them out over there, the Avital, the Bental, they're part of this line. The volcanoes reduce this 60-mile long border to 3 passes.
Tough to get in, tough to get out.
Right? Think of obstacles that instead of a wide open space like we can see off in the distance, anybody coming in this direction has to go between the volcanoes.
It's tight.
And there are only 3 passes that you can use. Tight is in relative terms, okay? But tighter certainly than a wide open front.
Gotcha.
And one of those is here. And this is what's known in the English history as the Valley of Tears. Wow. Now, I say the English history because in Hebrew it's called Emek HaBacha, which means the Valley of Crying. It's got a whole story to itself. Leave that for a moment. This was where the Syrians tried to break through. And the guys who were here basically kept this pass closed for 4 days against overwhelming odds.
They were severely outnumbered and outgunned.
We're talking about odds of 200 to 30, sometimes more than that. 10, 12, 15 to 1 odds. And as in any battle, there are many reasons for a victory or a defeat. Yeah. But the topography here was certainly one of the reasons that they were able to hold. and holding this gap, which also meant
Israel had the high ground.
well, it wasn't so much the high ground as the gap ground. Held the high ground as well, but it meant that the Syrians couldn't get around it because of the mountains. The reason that the army stopped here in 1967 was good strategic and tactical thinking, having no idea that in 2018 we would be facing a different type of enemy with different political situation, different technology, and yet, because we're here, Al-Qaeda and ultimately Iran is 20 miles from population centers of Israel, as opposed to looking down on them and seeing them directly on site. So it's an interesting example, I think, of a good tactical decision that was made in 1967, now having an effect over 50 years later, for different reasons, but good tactics are good tactics.
Yeah, Elliot, you can only imagine, God forbid, if Israel did not control the Golan Heights. As you said, the Iranian regime, the likes of ISIS, Al-Qaeda, they'd be literally
looking at Tiberias, Haifa.
Sea of Galilee, the Kinneret. Yes.
Exactly.
Elliot, this is great. I'm so glad you gave the historical overview, 1967, 1973, because now people will have a better idea why this area is so crucial today in 2018. We're going to talk about that some more now at a different location, right?
We're going to go over to what was a tank ramp in 1973 from where Israeli tanks stopped the Syrians, but it also, because it's that, it'll give us a great view out into Syria.
Wow, lead the way, my friend. Let's go. Elliot, wow, what an overlook we have here, overlooking Syria on a very windy day here in the Golan, on the mountains of Israel. As usual, hey, we could walk into Syria right now, right?
Yes, we could. The border is really right down here below us, maybe a mile or so away from here. Damascus, about 35 miles that way. If it were open, we could do lunch out there. Be there in, what, half an hour or so?
It just shows you, Elliot, the proximity of Israel's enemies.
Yes.
Damascus, the capital of Syria, about a 30-minute drive from where we're standing right now in Israel.
Yes. I think one of the things that's lost on people who are not from a country this small is how close, how tight everything is. And I mentioned earlier that the distance between here and the old border, we're talking about 11 miles, but 11 miles in normal military terms is insignificant. In Israeli terms, it's halfway to the Med.
Yeah, exactly. This country is the size, roughly, of the state of New Jersey.
Yes, with a populated area the size of Rhode Island.
Wow.
So we're talking tiny with enemies of global proportions, which, among other things, means that we have no room for trial and error. Along the border, we have a very interesting situation at the moment, because up until a couple of months ago, the situation was somewhat different. The situation in Syria was somewhat different. We have this 60-mile border, essentially, which starts up there on the Hermon Range with Lebanon on the other side, and ends down on the other end with Jordan. Gotcha. The southern end of that border is where the revolt in Syria actually began, the Dara area.
March 2011.
That was down there, and it spread from there. And that area, up until a month ago, was controlled by an organization called Shuhada al-Yarmouk. You know them as ISIS. And up along this way, a whole bunch of other terrorist organizations, many of whom, including the ISIS organization, were defeated by the Syrian, Russian, Iranian offensive that just ended about a month ago, a little over a month ago.
So that Russia, Syria, Iran axis is really kind of mopping up and mowing away the jihadi groups along the Syria-Israel border.
Well, okay, they haven't gone all the way. They cleared that area, which was important to them, because they're looking at it strategically. They need to get rid of the centers of opposition, the major centers. And Dara was significant in part symbolically because it all started there.
Yeah, and you can see Dara from here on the Golan Heights.
Yes, from further south you can see it.
You can see ISIS land right across
We were able to see ISIS right across the border. Yeah. So they're gone. But the reason they went there, as I said, is for strategic reasons. Idlib is their next major target.
That's the big one.
That's the big one. And if they get rid of that, they've basically won.
So the Assad regime, when they take Idlib, they've won. This nearly what, 9 years now,
right.
nearly? The Syrian conflict.
And here I have to say, I predicted it.
Yes, you did. Elliot and I, folks, have known each other for a long time.
Yes.
We've been talking about these issues on a regular basis for years. And yes, you did call it.
And when they were eulogizing Assad, I said he wasn't going anywhere, in large part because he had nowhere to go. And when he gained the support of Iran and Hezbollah and then Russia, he basically solidified his position.
How big of a game changer, Elliot, real quick, was Russia's entry in September 2015 into the Syrian conflict on Assad's side?
It was a major game changer.
Yeah.
It brought him a huge amount of force. It gave him the power to call in airstrikes. His air force was basically eliminated by the uprising. I say basically. He still had one, but it didn't have the punch that it did.
Yeah.
The Russians coming in on his side gave many, I'll call them fence sitters who were against him, the idea that maybe they should move to the other side of the fence that they're sitting on. And that was part of his strategy as well. He rallied many villages along the way, and I believe that's one of the reasons that he used chemical weapons. To have that carrot and stick in negotiating, for his people to go to those sort of not quite with him, not quite against him villages, or even the ones who went over to the other side, and tell them, look, amnesty today. Come back over and everything's okay. If not, you heard about that chemical weapon attack, right?
You're next.
You might be next, right? And that helped him a great deal. So the Russians, certainly a good deal of physical force, but a lot of psychological push on that as well.
In 2017, Kufi began speaking out publicly and behind closed doors to urge the White House to fulfill the promise made by every president for the last 2 decades. Move the U.S. Embassy to the capital of Israel, Jerusalem. In 2018, we witnessed history made in large part because you spoke out. On May 14, 2018, 70 years after Israel's rebirth as a modern nation, Pastor John Hagee prayed over the opening ceremony for the new Jerusalem Embassy. Today, for your gift of any amount to support Kufi's ongoing work to defend and bless the Jewish state, we will send you this limited edition commemorative coin in honor of how your voice helped move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. The president heard you, the world heard you, the Jewish people heard you, and Israel's enemies heard you. Visit our website at www.kufi.org/coin and ensure you receive a reminder of the miraculous role you played in making history.
Here we have Fatah Hasham. They used to call themselves Jabhat al-Nusra. They're
Also known as
Al-Qaeda.
Al-Qaeda. We're staring at
Here, Jubat al-Khashab, the village that you can see here next to the quarry, is under their control.
folks. There's Al-Qaeda, just over the horizon.
And down here. Down here. The village that you see down here in the valley, Khananebe, is in their hands as well. Just north of Jubat al-Khashab is a village, El Khadr, that's in the hands of Hezbollah. It's a Druze pro-regime village. So here we have Hezbollah, we have Al-Qaeda, we had ISIS.
ISIS a little further south.
You know.
Russia and Iran lurking, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. All at Israel's doorstep.
A terrorist buffet.
Yes. The world's worst actors have gathered in one place. Oh, and by the way, right across the border from the Jewish state.
Exactly. Here directly across from us, a little bit beyond, is the Syrian army. And from that base, they hold a strip of land all the way to Damascus.
Okay. They have a corridor.
A corridor up to
basically.
here, exactly.
And again, Damascus about 35 miles from where we're standing right now in Israel.
Correct. So it's one of the reasons why Assad isn't that concerned about this area. He's got reasonable control. Even if he's not controlling every single village, he'll get to it. Again, he needs to get rid of the heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned Russia. Russia's move in helped Assad. The Russians moved in entirely for their own reasons. with the collapse of Syria and Iraq and a good part of the Middle East, the empires are making their moves, or I call them the imperial wannabes, all of whom see America as at least the adversary, if not the enemy. Okay, I would say Russia sees America as an adversary. Iran sees America as an enemy. Turkey, well,
I was going to mention Turkey. That's
Right?
adversary,
Turkey.
enemy?
Yeah, you're right. Okay.
It's taking an interesting turn. That's another story.
Exactly. But those are the sort of the power players who are operating in here. Iran, on the other hand, is the real story here. And it's an Iran that has been the story for a long time, despite what was thought in previous administrations, particularly the most recent previous one. But Iran, going back to Khomeini, has had an expansionist imperial view of the world that sees America as the enemy strategically, geostrategically, and ideologically, religiously. Their move in Syria is based essentially on two things. One is to get to the coast because they want access to the Atlantic, and two is to get to this border to open a military front against Israel.
Iran wants access to the Atlantic.
Yes.
Just across the Atlantic is the United States, the Great Satan.
Yes.
So that's no coincidence.
They have stated that they plan for their Navy to patrol the Caribbean.
This is the Iranians.
The Iranians.
At America's door. We're talking about Israel's doorstep, at America's doorstep.
That's right. It's not a coincidence that they're operating, well, they're on the Straits of Hormuz by virtue of being there. They're operating in Yemen and threatening the Straits of Bab el-Mandeb, which is the Suez Canal. Getting into the Mediterranean means that they basically have access and choke points along all of the world's great maritime locations.
Wow, so all of a sudden the Iranian regime is projecting power globally, not just here in the region.
No. And look, they want to resurrect the Persian Empire. And the Persian Empire was global, and it had global aspirations.
And the Russians want to resurrect the Soviet Empire, and the Turks want to resurrect the Ottoman Empire.
And here we are.
And here's Israel.
That's right, in the middle of it, as usual. Look, I think there's something very important, because people tend to think of the Iranians as these fanatical religious mullahs with turbans who don't understand what's going on. You know, people talk about Putin as a chess player. People forget that the Persians invented chess.
That's right. Literally.
Okay? These people are chess players. They think strategically.
And they're patient.
Exactly. Over the past year, we've been fighting the Iranians in Syria. There have been strikes. As a matter of fact, there was just one.
Israel. As we're fighting the Iranians. Yeah, we've talked about it here in the show. Yeah. Okay. Some major flare-ups.
That's right. And in the last major one, we inflicted very heavy losses on their infrastructure in Syria. We set them back. I don't believe that changed their minds.
The Iranians' minds.
Correct. But I do believe that it changed their pace.
Good point.
And apropos patience, okay, we won't push a bad hand now. We'll drop back a little bit. This is when you castle and chess. Bunker yourself in a little. Let's build up some more. Next year's another year. The year after that is another year. We're not in a hurry.
They're playing the long game.
This year, 25 countries were represented at the 2018 CUFI Washington, D.C. Summit, the most ever in our 13-year history. They came and joined over 5,000 others in our nation's capital as we continue to stand in solidarity with Israel and the Jewish people. They celebrated and rejoiced at the annual Night to Honor Israel. At 4.3 million members, CUFI is the largest, most diverse pro-Israel organization in the nation. For Zion's sake, we will not keep silent. And for Jerusalem's sake, we will not be quiet. From near and far, we are one. From all over the world, we are united. We are CUFI.
And welcome back. One of the great untold stories today is how Israel is helping thousands of victims of that brutal Syrian civil war. Our Kufi delegation, led by our founder and chairman, Pastor John Hagee, saw this up close recently when we visited the Galilee Medical Center in Nahariya, Israel. They are treating victims of the brutality in Syria and helping Israel step into its destiny as a light unto the nations. Take a look.
The last 5 years we took injured Syrians, and that was amazing for us, and really appreciate my government decision that let us take care for them. We are the largest hospital in the Galilee, and we give them the best treatment. But the most important mission for us is humanitarian. This is Israel. We treat anyone. We don't ask questions. And the most important thing, as I said, we don't ask questions, take care for them. We don't investigate them. We just take care for them medically and tender care and love. We send them back once we finish the treatment. They come by ambulances of the IDF, Israel Defense Forces. Once we finish the treatment, we ask the IDF to take them back. And this is our mission.
رشقنا عند الباب نزلنا.
During his trying to evacuate his family to his car and the small children, and one of the snipers saw him and he shot him.
فاجتني طلقة هون، فآخر شيء أتذكره إنه طارت عيني قدامي ووقع أغمى عليه.
So after he shot it in his head, he already saw his eye in front of him.
هون وقعت أغمى علي ما يقارب ساعة ونص وما أحس إنه بيشيلوني.
He was fainted and
بعد ساعة ونص شالوني وحسيت ما يقارب 5 دقائق إنه كان مغمى علي نهائي، بس عم بنزف كتير، صاير معي نزيف بالراس. أخذوني على المشفى الميداني، فما كان في وسيلة للعلاج نهائيا. قالوا إنه 5 دقائق ساعة هذا ميت لا محالة، لأنه إصابتي كانت
They took him to the medical field, and they said that he's going to die. Nothing could be done for him.
فالمسؤول حكى لا، بنطلعوا على دولة إسرائيل علاج متطور وفي راحة حالات أقوى من هيك، والحمد لله ونجحت. فطلعوني لهون.
And one was in charge there. He said that they should take him to Israel. Only Israel could save his life. Israel, as a government, decided that we can take care for them. We are not allowed to take care for anyone without the decision of our government. I really appreciate my president, my prime minister, Bibi Netanyahu, and his government that decided that we take care for these injured Syrians. They want to come to us. They know names even of the doctors, of nurses. They know everything about us, and they know that we take care for them, as I said, in tender care and love, and the best Western hospital that could give medical treatment for them.
Folks, that is an amazing story that you will not see in the mainstream media, but you'll see it right here on The Watchman. Well, coming up after the break, Elliot Chodoff is back to share some final thoughts on the collision course between Israel and Iran in Syria and what comes next. Stick around.
In spring 2019, join Holocaust survivor and historian Irving Roth on a once-in-a-lifetime remembrance tour through Poland. His story of loss, survival, and hope will bring the pages of history to life as you walk through the streets of the infamous Warsaw Ghetto, the silent barracks of Nazi death camps like the one where Irving slept at Auschwitz, and the memorials to the heroes who risked their lives to rescue their Jewish neighbors from Hitler's evil plan. You'll be inspired and challenged to put your faith into action. You'll have the opportunity to interact with the local Polish Jewish community and meet with the daughter of a famous hero of the Holocaust, one of the righteous among the nations honored by the State of Israel. Take advantage of this rare opportunity to walk with and learn from Irving Roth as he takes you on a journey of his memories of life before, during, and after the Holocaust. To register for this historic trip to Poland with Kufi and Irving Roth, Go to the Kufi website and sign up today.
And welcome back. We're wrapping up this very special Watchman episode on the Syrian conflict and how it affects you. Let's head back now to the Israel-Syria border on the Golan Heights with top military and strategic analyst Elliot Chodoff.
It's not a symmetrical collision course. It's the immovable object of Israel facing the Iranian juggernaut, which is eventually going to bring itself to here one way or the other. Our goal, our strategy, has been to convince them not to do it without going to war. I believe that ultimately that will be a failed strategy. Not that it's a bad strategy, it's a good strategy, but I don't believe it's going to work. I believe that ultimately the only way we're going to stop them is by going to war with them. Whether we do it at this stage or at another stage, that has to do with too many variables to predict.
Thanks again to our good friend Elliot Chodoff for joining us and sharing his razor-sharp analysis of the situation in Syria. Now, Elliot will be back with us in the coming weeks to join us on Israel's border with Lebanon to analyze the Hezbollah threat. You will not want to miss that. Our team at Christians United for Israel is bringing you this kind of cutting-edge information because the body of Christ needs to be informed, educated, and activated. We quote the book of Hosea often here on the show. God says, "My people perish for lack of knowledge." Here at Kufi, we want to make sure that that never happens. You see the phone number and website there on your screen, so call or click and join our movement. It's a mighty move of God for such a time as this. Well, thanks for being with us this week on the Syrian border. Until next time, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace.